Okay, so tonight we are talking about levels and curves, which are adjustment layers. And the last online training we did was about layers. If you missed that, there's a recording. And you can go watch that sometime this weekend, if what I'm talking about tonight is overwhelming to you. Because we're just going to be talking about two adjustments, and that's levels and curves. And in Photoshop Elements, where I first got started with photo editing at all they had was levels. So I came to love levels and learned to really make the most of it. I mean, I just pushed levels and found all different new uses for levels. And then when I was able to get Photoshop, I started with CS4, I think. And then I learned curves, but I still fall back to levels. It's my favorite. So we're going to start with levels, and then we'll see how you can do all the same things with curves as well. So on page 1 of the notes, if you're new coming in, there's a handout section on the little sidebar of the GoToMeeting. I'm going to make sure I'm recording. I am recording. And come back. Okay. So what can levels and curves do for you? Those two adjustment layers can adjust exposure and contrast, add color pop, brighten midtones, change white balance, alter color tones, fix sun haze, just a lot that you can do. You can add haze with it as well. So on the bottom of page 1, I just briefly go into what adjustment layers are, and they're non-destructive edits. You can go into them over and over and over again before you flatten. So if I decide that something I did down here was too much, I can always go back into it. And here, I did the dehaze. So I dehazed it here. And I might say, you know what, I want a little more of this haze back. And I can lower the opacity, or I can go in and tweak it a little bit more. But it's open to me. That data and changes are still available to me. And that is the beauty of adjustment layers and why they're called non-destructive. And I don't have these labeled, but ideally when you're working with layers, you would label what you did. So here I could do a dehaze. And with this one, what did I do? I changed the white balance. And this one I brightened. Okay. So this was just an example. We'll get started with a different image here. Let's see. We'll work with this one. Let's see, oops, this one. We'll just work with this one first. Okay, so this picture is lovely, except for the apple's like mostly eaten and it's not real attractive. But other than that, it's a lovely image. And she's a little cool and a little underexposed, and the image just a little blah. So we can use levels or curves, or both, to bring this picture to life. Okay. I had to put some chapstick on. Lips were dry. All right. So the first thing I want to do is, for me, and I'm kind of jumping ahead of the notes. I'm going to jump to white balance on page 3. A lot of times I will fix the white balance first. If the exposure isn't so dark, I can't tell what's going on. You know, here I can still see what the image and see it well, and so I will fix the white balance. But you can always do exposure first. All right. So there's two ways to access, actually there's multiple ways to access adjustment layers. Let's talk about the way that I learned first, that you'll see in a lot of my tutorials and things like that, and it's down here at the bottom of the layers panel. If you're not seeing your layers panel, go to Window and then down to Layers. Okay, so see my layers panel went away. So if you're not seeing yours, go to Window, Layers. Then at the bottom, there's a circle that's half black, half white. And I'd click on that. Then all these adjustment layers come out, and levels and curves are right there together. So I click on a levels adjustment. Then the levels panel pops out. So that's one way. Another way is up here in the Adjustments panel. If you're not seeing an Adjustments panel, go to Window and Adjustments. So I unclicked it, and now it's gone. I can still go Windows and Adjustments, and it'll pop back up wherever I last left it. So I've customized my panel, my workspace a little bit. So don't be alarmed if mine doesn't look exactly like your workspace. I can create a levels adjustment by clicking on the levels icon. And the levels icon is pretty much a visual representation of your histogram, a black and white representation of your histogram. So I'll click on that and it pops out a levels panel for me, or a levels menu. So that's the second way to create it. Third way is up here under Image, and then Adjustments, and then Levels. Oh, sorry, that's a good point. Real quick, we want Adjustment Layers, and so we want Layer, New Adjustment Layer. Ooh, so I'm going to show you the difference between the two. Okay, Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and then Levels. There we go. All right, so we have 3 different ways that we have created levels adjustments. I am going to illustrate that other way, because there was a 4th way to create a levels adjustment, but that would be on a background or a duplicate layer. So we'll talk about that. I'll circle back to that later, but I want to keep with the true adjustment layers. So 3 ways to create that. And I didn't do anything with any one of those, did I? So let's go in and work with each levels adjustment. Ideally, you would create it, work with it, and then go on. Here I created them, didn't do anything to them, but I can go back into them. So I'm going to double click on the icon. And don't worry if your icon doesn't look exactly like this one. If you have an earlier version of Photoshop, or if you're working with Photoshop elements, everything I'm talking about with layers and with levels, you can do. And your icon that's right here will look very different than this circle that's half black, half white. So here we have the histogram, and this is what the photographer, whoever took this picture, this is what she would see on her LCD screen on the back of her camera if she looked at the histogram, except for it would be red and white, and red and yellow and green and blue. She'd have all those colors, but if it was just black and white, that is the same shape she would be seeing. In levels, let's switch back to the top of page 2. There are some little sliders there. So we've got black, gray, and whites. The black is that darkest area of our image. This gray is the midtones, and the white is the brightest area of our image. Typically, with some to most images, you want this white slider and this black slider to be up next to the edges of the histogram. So we can click on it, click and drag over, and click and drag over. Okay, so we just adjusted those values. Because when there's nothing in between these areas, it's just, it's blank. So there's absolutely 0 pixels that were within this range. So now we just redefined the range by bringing in the white and the black sliders. This midtone, and I can pull this away so it gets out of our way. And midtones, if we pull it to the left, it brightens. If we pull it to the right, it darkens. Now watch as I pull it to the left and it brightened it, but I lost some contrast, didn't I? Let me go back. Let's go back to 1. So there's before, we got strong contrast in her face and her eyes. And as I brighten it up, I've lost some contrast. It looks a little hazier, doesn't it? A little foggier. So to combat that, I'm doing exposure instead of white balance, like I said. So I went back to exposure, sticking with the notes so I don't confuse people. And so I'm going to click the black slider and pull it in a little bit more so that I can bring back some of the contrast. And we can, down here at the bottom of the panel, if you see this eyeball right here, you can turn it off. So there's before and there's after. You don't have to come over to the layers panel to turn it off and turn it on to see the before and after. Okay, so we brightened her up right there, didn't we? I'm going to double click on the layer to name it. So I'm going to fix exposure, or you can say brighten, either way. All right. Now, her face is still fairly dark, and if I take my eyedropper right here and I click somewhere in her skin, it's showing me the color there. It's showing me the color. So she's still underexposed. She's still very dark. We need to brighten up just her face. But also, and this is not in your notes, she's still a little cool. So if we look here, all right, so if we look here where it says RGB and we see some values, we see that our reds are 144, our greens are 123, and our blues are 122. Now, this is not a skin tones webinar or workshop. It's just not. But I will give you this information that your blues are always going to be lower than your greens, and your greens lower than your reds. The proportion I'm not going to get into right now. Typically, your reds are going to be close to 200, so we know it's underexposed because look how low this red value is. So we need to brighten up just her face, and we need to warm her up also. And I'm going to warm her up next with this one. So I'm going to double click on the icon, and then I'm going to grab the gray dropper, okay, the gray dropper in the middle. And then I'm going to click somewhere in the image that should be neutral. And a good place when you've got people and their eyes are open, the whites of the eyes work really nicely. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit more and click. So there, it turned her a little too green for me. So I'm just going to keep clicking and see what I can find. Well, that warmed her up a good bit. I can try again down here. I like that even better. I like that. And I can turn it off. So there's before and there's after. Still a little green, but we'll work on that in just a minute. So fix white balance. All right. So we've gone from before, after. Again, she's a little green, but I want to fix that. We'll fix that. The next thing I want to do with this is I want to selectively brighten her face. And I'm going to double click back into the icon, come to this gray slider, move it to the left. Remember that brightens up the image? Bring over the black slider just a little bit. Now, I don't want the entire image to be brightened. I only want her face. And this goes back to what we learned in the layers webinar. And it's at the end, I left in a fair number of note pages from the layers webinar because these two go hand in hand. So I only want her face to be brightened. So I'm going to click on the mask icon and do Command I or Control I on the keyboard. Command I or Control I. Control I for a PC, Command I for a Mac. And then I'm going to hit B for brush, and I'm going to make my brush bigger. Now, I need my brush to be black or white, and it's neither. So I'm going to hit X on my keyboard. X, oops, I'm going to go back to D, actually, there we go. D resets it to default, okay, D to default, and then X will flip it back and forth like that. So I don't want a black brush because a black brush on a black mask does nothing for us. But if we use a white brush, so now my foreground is white, I use a white brush on a black mask, then it's going to reveal what I just concealed by inverting it. So I had it bright, I inverted it, so now the mask is hiding that brightness underneath. And I can expose the brightness with a white brush. I have a brush opacity, so I could say I only want to reveal, 64% of it. And then I come over here and click and just drag. So now I can selectively brighten. A lot of times, don't forget like the other parts of the body, the extremities and things like that. I see that happen. I make that mistake sometimes too. I brighten the face, and all of a sudden I look down and the arms and legs are all still real dark. So make sure to get the other parts of the body that are showing. All right. So here we just brighten face. And I'm going to turn them all off by hovering over the background eye symbol there. the icon, and I'm gonna hold down my Alt key or Option. So Option on a Mac or Alt key on a PC and click. So there's before, there's after. Now, maybe we're going to do all this again with curves. So we're going to reinforce and do the exact same things with curves in just a minute. So we're going to do levels, and you're going to see how much how similar these two adjustment layers are. Some people love curves more, some people love levels more, and that's okay. But I want to do all these steps with levels, and then we're going to do them with curves. Okay, so she's a little green. She's a little green. And I'm on page 3 now of the notes. So I'm going to do another levels adjustment, and I'm just going to click right there. And it popped out. Before I had it nest in over here on my sidebar. I'm going to show you how to do that. So I'm going to click and just drag it over. See how I pulled it over until a little blue bar highlighted, and that's right where I want it to go. So I click, and that's anchored there. And I can click and it pops open, or when I double click on icon, it pops open and that particular panel for that layer opens up. If you need to move it, click and just drag it where you want it to go. Okay, so she's a little green. Now I want to talk about colors. In Photoshop and Lightroom, and in just colors in general in photography, colors have complementary colors. So when we increase red, it's as if we're decreasing cyan. So if you look at that color wheel, what's right across from red is cyan, and green and magenta. So as green goes up, magenta goes down. As magenta goes up, green goes down. Or if we pull down green, we're going to increase magenta. And same for yellow and blue. So a lot of times when an image is too cool, too much blue, if we go in and pull the blue down, it's going to make the image seem more, it's going to add more yellow to it, and it's going to make it warmer. Here we have a little bit too much green, I think. And so I'm going to show you where you can tweak the colors inside of levels and curves. See where it says RGB right here? If you click there, then we can go to the individual color. And here I'm just going to say, okay, there's a little bit too much green. So I'm just going to click the mid-tone slider and pull it down just a little bit. And just that little tweak helped it. Before, after. It was just a little bit. Now I do want to encourage you that what you may be seeing on your monitor isn't exactly the same thing I'm seeing on my monitor. All monitors are different, and not only that, how we perceive color is very different. I'm on a MacBook Air, a 13-inch MacBook Air from it's 2 years old, and also I've calibrated it with Spider 4 Pro calibration system. But still, if you have a PC, you might be seeing it a little bit more magenta or more green. You just don't know. I encourage you to calibrate your monitors, especially if you have a PC. I've yet to see a PC monitor that I thought had good color. Most Macs do fairly well, but might need just a little tweaking. But also how we perceive our eyes might be a little bit different. And that I was made aware of that with that whole dress, gold versus blue, and white and gold versus blue and black, and it was just it baffled my mind. I was a gold and white girl, and my husband was blue and black. So anyway, so know that if you're not seeing exactly what I'm saying, it could be your monitor, it could be you, maybe it's me, maybe how I'm perceiving color. But here I'm giving you the tools and the techniques, and then you can use them to best fit what you see on your monitor. Okay, so I just pulled down the greens just a little bit, and it did it. And honestly, I could still probably brighten her face up a little bit more, but I'm gonna do that right now. And let's just I'm gonna do pull down green. Here I'm gonna click back on the brighten face layer and increase my brush opacity and brush on some more. So we have a little bit brighter. I like that better. We can do before and after. Now, I'm noticing something, and this is a good thing because it illustrates how we can use our brushes to conceal areas. So the fixed exposure, if we turn it off and we turn it back on, look what it did to her eye right here. It darkened it. It made them beautiful and everything, but it darkened it so much that we can hardly, it just made a lot of it very dark and we lost detail. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn it off again, turn it back on. See how I made it too dark? So I'm going to use a black brush this time. I've got my mask outlined and I'm going to hit X. And now I am just going to lower this down a good bit lower and brush right over here. Brush right like that. Just so it conceals the extra contrast that we brought in to the image and allows the color of her eye to come through. Okay. We can even, let me pull up my history here. I moved my stuff around. I've got info, need my history panel. There we go. Oh, it's nesting over there. I moved it around for the last training I did, and I forgot where I put it for illustration. So if I come back to right here, so there's before concealing it, and there's after concealing that area. Before and after. And if you want to try, you can also conceal a little bit right here to bring back a little more texture of her hair, more detail of her hair right there. If you're wondering how I got this history panel to show up, just go to Window and History, and then you can move it around. A lot of times I have it nestled in the side, like right in here. And I'll do that. Actually, a lot of times it's up there with my actions. Alrighty. So before and after. I'll show you, I'll come back to this because there's other stuff we can do. These are only adjustment layers, only levels. I've used all levels for this, all levels. So we've gone through adjusting exposure and contrast. We've not done add color pop. We'll do that in a minute. Although just by bringing up the contrast, we added some color, didn't we? We brightened the midtones, we changed the white balance, and we altered color tones. And I showed you about fixing the sun haze. Oh, no, I didn't. In my mind, I did, didn't I? All right. Okay, let's see. Let me take a snapshot of this and come back. Okay. So this one is hazy. It's not as hazy as I wanted. Maybe I need to fix this one. There we go. So here, this is straight out of the camera, very hazy, beautiful in its own right, but let's say you don't want the haze. And levels and curves have a great way to be able to tweak and fix that haze. So I'm going to create the levels adjustment. I'm going to pull it over here or make it smaller. Okay. And I'm going to grab the black dropper right here. And now I'm going to click somewhere in the image that should be black. But you got to make sure it really should be black, not just, could it be black but black, 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 not brown, black. So if I click on her boots, it's going to make it too much, and her boots are probably not black. They're probably brown. And so I'm going to back up with Command Z or Control Z. And I think where I did before was way down here under her boots, like under the shadow. And I clicked right there. And now it did pretty much the same thing. So look for the darkest area. We do have a little sense of brown with that. So I like it, but it went too far. It's too much for me. Too much of a dehaze. And so what I can do, I'll show you. Let's see. Before and after. Man, those colors really came out, didn't they? We cannot move, see for this go to webinar thing. Lower the layer opacity so we can balance it. We can also use the brush and conceal it in areas that we don't want it to have effect. Okay, so you see the area right here with all these trees, and we lose that, don't we? It's gone. So I can use my brush, hit B, and it's black. Black I want to conceal. And when I'm concealing like this, I want to make sure I lower it down because I can always keep going and it gets stronger. Whoops, I need it to be stronger than that. All right. That is still too much, isn't it? I'd have to lower it down a good bit. The other thing we could do is invert it. There's a drastic difference there. And then lightly brush in where we want it to be. That is such a drastic difference. I don't know if we'll be able to get back that. Whoops. Ah, sorry. Come on. There we go. It's still not what I want it to be. You still have so much of the haze. So you have to find a balance there. To find a balance between having your bushes and not having them. That's interesting, isn't it? All right, so you can dehaze, and often it does work beautifully, but again, you might lose some areas of detail that you had before. If that makes sense. Okay, now I want to work with curves. Before I do that, I do want to show you something. The first time, if you have never done this before, you might want to do this. Either click on curves or levels. And this is on page 3 of the notes. If you're late coming in and you're wondering where the notes were, they're in the side panel for GoToWebinar. At the bottom, there's a section that says handouts, and the PDF is right there. So all you have to do is click and download, and it downloads it right where you are. Okay, so oftentimes we need to reset what Photoshop sees as white and black and gray. And how we can do that is double clicking. Actually, I'm going to delete this, create brand new one so we got a fresh start. And double click on your black dropper. This is on page 3. Double click on your black dropper, and where it probably has 0, 0, 0 in RGB, put 10, 10, 10. And then hit OK, and it's going to give you a message. Do you want to save this as the new default? I think that's what it says. Hit yes. Okay, once you've done that, you double click on the gray slider and do 133, 133, and 133. And then hit OK, and it probably prompt you again. Do you want to save this as the new default? And then double click on the white dropper, and do 245, 245, 245. And what that does, so here, you see where it's showing as white? It's, I can't make this any bigger, I don't think. But see where the little circle is? So it's still very white, but if I click there, here we can see that is what we're saying it should be, and this is what the normal default is for Photoshop, is this pure white, absolutely nothing. And we're saying no, that this value down here is what we want to perceive as white. All right, and then hit OK. Let me show you black. So black, you see, is just above the bottom. The very bottom left corner is black. The very top left corner is white. And we're just adjusting it to say, no, not, not black, black, black like that. And you can't even tell the difference hardly between these two. This bottom one is what we're wanting. The top one is this very bottom corner black. And the one we want is just a little lighter. Just a little lighter. And then the 133 is in between those two, the 10 and the 245. Now, I did not come up with that on my own. I'll be very clear. Like 5 years ago, when I was first learning Photoshop, or Photoshop Elements, I saw that via Scott Kelby tutorial. So that does not come from me, that comes from Scott Kelby. But I have found that it works, and it gives, it tells Photoshop that when we're working with pictures, our black isn't pure black and our white isn't that absolute zero, no color white, that there's going to be some tiny bit of color in our whites. And I think it works. Okay, so now let's work with curves, okay? So let's go back and work with curves, doing the same thing. So for up here, 3 ways to find curves. Down at the bottom, half black, half white, and then curves. So that's one way. All right. That's one way. Second way, in the adjustments panel, wherever you have it stored, click on curves. That's the second way. All right. And then image, layer, new adjustment layer, curves. And just ask you to name it if you want to change the name, but I'm not going to right now, and hit X. Okay, so I've got 3 curves I did nothing with. So let's go back through and do the same thing. So the first thing I want to do is give this a little dehaze. I want to dehaze it a little bit. So I'm going to double click on curves, and this time I'm going to move it right there. And I'm going to click on the black slider and click somewhere that I think should be black. And sometimes you have to go maybe down here, near the nape of the neck, where it should be really shadowed. We can try there. We could probably try the letters on her shirt, but that probably is more of a grayish black than real black, but we'll try. Okay, so I like that. It's dark. It's definitely dark. Definitely dark. And you can see that it even changed our colors as well. Our color channels got changed. Now let's say we don't want the hazy look. We want color pop. I mean, contrast and brightness. So we don't want haze. We want this time. You may love the haze. I'm not saying it's wrong. Be clear about that. So here I'm just going to do dehaze. And then I'm keeping these curves separate so it's very clear in what we're doing. This time I want to brighten it. I'm going to brighten it. So when you're working with curves, levels was very clear. We had black slider, we had a white slider, and we had a gray slider. So it's very defined and easy to use. Here it's a little bit different, but we're seeing the same histogram that we would see if we had levels. Exact same histogram that we're seeing. Now here, this top portion of the line, this diagonal line, this top portion is the brightest part of your image. Okay, from here to here is really the brightest part of your image. And then from here to about here is your midtones. And then here to down here, we have the shadows and blacks and darks, okay, the darkest areas of your image. And you just click, okay, you get a little, your mouse is going to be a little crosshair kind of thing, a little plus sign almost. Just click and drag. So here I can show you, I'm going to brighten this image a good bit. All right, now again, we're losing a little bit of contrast, aren't we? It's a little hazy. And so we might be able to come down here to the bottom and just pull down just a little bit. Just a little bit. So we have a very, very, very slight S-curve here. Big change up top, but very little change in the darks. But I don't want to darken the contrast too much. A lot of times you'll hear an S-curve pop, right? And it's making this line slightly into an S. And I'm going to show you. So maybe sometimes this is all your image needs. See that S? Well, we've brightened here and we've darkened here. I'm actually going to pull this down here, and you can keep clicking along the line and creating these points. And see, it's a little too much, isn't it? All right, but it still needs lots of brightening. Lots and lots and lots of brightening. This type of S-curve would not work for this image. This image was really underexposed and hazy. So I would not use a typical S curve pop. Some images, that's all it needs is a little slight brightening and a little slight pulling down of the contrast. It just darkens it just a little bit and gives it a little bit of pop. But for this one, I'm just going to click and drag up, brighten it up a good bit. She's still cool. We've got to fix that. Maybe just pull this down just a little bit. Alrighty. So now double clicking. Naming your layers, especially if you have you're editing and trying to do a lot of things, naming those layers will help you instead of having to click on, click off. What did I do here again? I can't remember. What was this one? So naming those layers, if you're going to have several layers in your edit, can save you time. All right, curves 3, which we've done nothing with. It's empty so far. Now I'm going to tweak the white balance, which again, I often do that at the beginning, but I'm doing it in line here. Okay, so I want, and she needs more brightening. She definitely does. And actually, I may do that. Whoops, I may do that now. Let's brighten her up a good bit more. Oh, too much. Too much. She's so cool. All right. And now I'm going to invert this mask. I'm going to click on the mask. Got to click on it, hit I, Control I or Command I, and then we need a brush. So click B on your keyboard. There's a list of keyboard shortcuts on the last page, page 8. And my brush is black. That's not going to help me. My brush needs to be white. So I'm going to hit X on my keyboard and increase the brush opacity, and then brush. Okay. So we've got that. And we need to brush her arm too. Be careful when you do this that you don't go too much outside of the area because you don't want a halo. See how I went outside of it? So you don't want that. Okay, we want to make sure that you stay inside the skin. All right. Alrighty. There's our before and our after. Now I'm gonna warm her up a little bit. And we can just do another curve. So you can do the circle down here or that up there. I'm gonna click on the gray dropper and I'm gonna click somewhere in the whites of her eyes. Ooh, that's lovely. One little click. And remember, you may have to click multiple times. And I often get the question too, well, what do I do if there's no whites of the eyes? You know, there's no person, or their eyes are closed, or looking at each other and not at me, and I can't see the whites of their eyes. Well, here I might have tried the flower. So it got me, that's better. So I clicked on the flower petal. A little too much red or magenta, something's still going on there. So I'd keep trying, but it was better. And I just look around the image for something that should be neutral, not necessarily white. Maybe it should be gray. You know, maybe here on her pant leg. Well, that really warmed it up. So let's say that's all I had to go on was this area on her pants. That's all I had to go on. Okay. Although what I found in the whites of her eyes was lovely. Let's say her eyes are closed. She's just looking at the flower, and I could click on the area on her pants, and I'm going to close this up. And it's too strong for me, so I'm going to lower the layer opacity down to where it's more pleasing. So maybe about right there, just depending on how warm. And here we got beautiful backlight. Her hair's a little, squiggly there, but beautiful backlight. And so this might be just what I want. And here I'll do fix white balance. I'm gonna increase it some more. So let's say this is where we are, and I say, oh, that's the best I can get, or whatever. I don't know. Let's say, like I did with, how there was a little bit of green left in it. Well, here it's a little too yellow. So I'm gonna do another curves, and I'm gonna click where it says RGB, and now I'm gonna go down to blues. So remember, if there's too much yellow, we can pull down the yellow. Well, here it's kind of hard to pull down the yellow, but what we can do is pull up the blue. So I'm going to click on the blue line and just pull it up a little bit. All right, and see if I do a lot, see how much it cools it down. So we don't want much. I may not want much, just a little. Okay, just a little. And so you just think about that color wheel and tweak it so it works for you. That was just a little tiny change. All right, so you can go, let's double click again. If there's too much green, I would go to the greens, pull down the green. If there's too much magenta in it, I would pull the line and pull it up. Keep getting this little jumping thing, so checking to make sure people are still with me. Okay. Alrighty. I hope everybody's still with me. The GoToMeeting thing keeps popping up at me. I don't know what's going on. All right. So I'm going to delete this one since I've shown it, go back into it. So I'm double clicking and I'm going to click on the gray dropper. So I'm getting the gray dropper for white balance. Gray dropper for white balance. I'm going to click on the whites of the eyes and keep clicking until I find something I like. So now it looks a little green to me, actually. Isn't that funny? Okay. All right. Isn't that funny? Let me go back to this down here. All right, so I did her pants leg. All right, and it's too much, so I'm gonna lower the layer opacity a good bit. All right, there we go. Now, I don't know if I can fix this. Her eyes are almost dead. There's no catch lights, barely any catch lights in them. This is a good example. Because the image was underexposed, do you see how noisy it is when we bring it back up? That's why it is super important that you expose correctly in camera. There are things, so if you're thinking, well, if I expose correctly, I blow out everything behind it and I want stuff behind it. You need to learn how to bracket. I would recommend learning how to bracket so that you can get the exposure you want. And so if I change it if I add my bracketing for exposure bracketing, I have it set to do 1 over, 1 how I want it, and 1 under. Or I could do 2 over, 1 how I want it, and 2 under. And all I do is hold down my shutter and it goes, and it does it. So then I can come in and merge those images. I can get that background I want, have it, by underexposing the person, I get the background. So I keep the background in Photoshop, and you do that with layers, and that's something we'll do later, okay, in another training session. But while we're talking, I want to show you how noisy this picture is because she was so underexposed. And I love that I actually have this wonderful, talented photographer who was probably going for a hazy image here. And so I love that it's a little underexposed so I can illustrate this and show the noise that happens when your underexposed image is brought back up in post-processing and how we see the noise. So just a good illustration. Learn to use some bracketing. Most cameras have it, unless you have like a entry-level camera. The mid-level and professional lines have bracketing. Check into exposure bracketing. Okay, so I'm going to try and brighten her eyes up a good bit. And know this, that everything I'm doing, you probably could also do with other adjustment layers or other ways. I love that Photoshop does that. I mean, there are 5, 6, 7 ways sometimes to do the same exact thing. So just because I'm showing you this one way doesn't mean it's the only way. All right. So when I show you this, I don't want you to think, well, I've always been doing such and such, and why should I do this one? Well, maybe not. Maybe you don't need to do it this way. Keep doing the way you do it. But for those who are brand new, we can show you this way until you might see others, then you find out what you want to do and what suits you. Okay, so I want to brighten her eyes up a little bit, and we'll use curves again. Hey, curves is great, right? So I'm gonna brighten it, brighten it, brighten it, brighten it, brighten it. So we see how our eyes are brightened, right? We like that. Now, the whole image is way too bright, right? Way too bright. We've blown out the flower all around her hair. So I'm going to do Command I or Control I on a PC. Zoom back in. I'm doing Command plus or Control plus on a PC. Command plus on a Mac, Control plus on a PC to zoom in and zoom out. And so it's black. I covered it all up by inverting that mask. And now I need to use a white brush. So my foreground is white, and I'm going to zoom in again. And at the highest opacity, I will brush just on her catch lights. If we can just get that. Bring those eyes back to life instead of being dead. Just on the catch lights. Right, and then I might lower the brush opacity down and get the rest of the eyes. And bring those eyes back to life just a little bit. Might even try and do that again because probably could do that. Okay. Alrighty, so before and after we have before, underexposed, a little green-ish kind of, hazy, and then we're able to bring it to this after. Okay, so let's see here. The other thing that you can do with levels or curves, and I often do it with levels, after I've done an edit, a lot of times along the way when you're editing in layers, you might clip some areas you didn't mean to. And so a good way to see if you have clipped something, I'm just going to create a levels adjustment this time for this illustration. And if you have, first of all, if you have it climbing this left side, then something's clipped. Here we don't see anything. We can't really tell if it's clipping right here. But I'm going to hold down, click on the white slider, and I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option. I need to get this out of the way. There we go. And slide it over. So we know that area right there was clipped, really. And I think when you're, depending on where you're printing, some photo labs like nothing to be over 245 right here in this box. You can see 248. Some are okay with 250. So we'll see at 250, I've clipped the area. We've clipped the area of her hair, that backlighting. We pull it on down. I'm holding down my Alt key or my Option key. And so there we get a little bit of her shoulder. So nothing's clipped that needs fixing. I'm okay with that area being clipped. And what that clipping means, it's so bright, there's no color value left. It's just white. It's just white. If I come here, we'll look, and probably have some clipping right here, and I don't know where else. So let's look, and I'm just going to create a top layer levels, top layer levels. Hold down my Alt key and click. Yep, her hair. We'll pull over. The area on her, behind her on the street, looks like. So those areas at 245. This area right here. Now, what do you do if you see clipping? Well, you need it if it's say it's on the face or an arm or maybe a piece of clothing that you don't want it to be clipped because it's going to print flat. You want that texture back. So just start going through and turning off and turning on and seeing what really added a lot of brightness. And this did. This really didn't. That's just a color change. There we just brightened her face. There we pulled down the greens. And here's just our, whoops, go back. There we go. You gotta remember to pull it back once you've done it. That should be nothing. All right, so when we fixed exposure, we really brightened. So if we want to try and save some of the hair here, we can come back to the mask and use a brush that's black. Okay, we got a brush. I'm gonna hit X on my keyboard, X, and I'm gonna increase the brush opacity. That's how strong, how much of that change comes through, or how much I cover up. Sorry, here's how much I cover up. And so if I say I want to cover up a lot of this, let's see, that may not work because it's really darkening, isn't it? So I'll reduce the brush opacity there. Do just enough so it doesn't really bother us here. And now I'll come up and do it again and see if we rescued some of that. All right, so at 245, the street's no longer there, and we have less hair that's clipped. If you want to save all that hair, you could try. You can work on that, but it might have just come out of the camera clipped, and we can't do anything about that. Here I'm going to brighten her eyes up like we did before, her catch lights. And so because I was doing all levels here, I'm going to go and do levels, and I'm just going to brighten up this here, brighten up the midtones, pull some contrast back. Do Command I or Control I. Zoom in. Need a white brush, so I'm hitting X. Increase my brush opacity. Let's brush it on her eyes. Make those eyes come to life a little bit more. And we could do her under eye circles and smooth her skin and do other stuff. But considering we did all levels from there to there, or this one, all curves there to there. That was just a there. Okay, so this was, and there's something else you can do with, let me try and get, so we could dehaze this. Let's do a color pop with this one. It's probably going to be too extreme, but I'm going to show you. So I'm going to do levels, all right? I'll pull this blacks down, pull down the midtones a little bit, or you could brighten them, because what I'm going to do. All right, so we did a tweak. We did a tweak. And it brought us a little more color, didn't it? But it also blew out our some of our shadows and made them too dark. But it's going to be okay. We're going to get those back. Then we can change the blend mode to soft light. So here, soft light color pop. We're doing that color pop right now. So I pull down the sliders. Where it says normal in your panel, click there and do soft light. Okay, so we have a lot more color now, don't we? But let's say I don't want it in certain areas. I can use a black brush to conceal it, or I can invert it and do a white brush to reveal it. It just depends. So I'll do the black brush. So I don't want it on here. And I don't want it really on her face in any of this. I think we could have a little more contrast on her face now that I'm looking at it though. We got to be careful about that. All right. So there we have a color pop. And here we don't have a whole lot of color to pop, but we can do the same thing with curves. We can just do a little, like, let's do a little S curve here. Actually, even less of one. Pull that down a little bit. Again, we don't have much color. This is a very neutral image. Change it to soft light. Okay, so, and this is great for like those moody pictures or fall pictures. And here we'll invert it, Command I or Control I. And I've got a black mask, so now I need a white brush. My brush is active, but it's black, so I'm gonna hit X. X on the keyboard. And now I can brush on, I'm gonna lower it down a little bit, and brush on where I want it to be ultra colorful. Or we could have concealed it on her. Oops, sorry. Very different, isn't it? I can still brighten her up some more. All right, but it's been 1 hour, and I have another 30 minutes of stuff to share if you'll hang with me. So when you download Montana Skies, they're images of clouds taken in Montana. All right, so different cloud pictures. And what you're going to do, and we just have some quick Shutterstock pictures that we can use. Let's see which one I wanted to use. This one. So I'm just going to use this one real quickly. So we've got, it's a sweet, sweet picture. There's really, it's lovely. What if we wanted a sky that's a little more interesting than that? So what we do is we go File, Place, Embedded or Linked, it really doesn't matter, Place Embedded, and then navigate to the sky you want to use. And so I'm just going to keep clicking down to find a sky I want. So maybe that one. And I'm going to hit place. All right. So what it does is now that if you look on the side here, we have our cloud as a layer, a cloud image, and then we have our background, our picture, the two little girls on the beach. And what I'm going to do is just move it around. And right now, it's like a move tool that is active. And I can bring it up here. We can stretch it out. Okay, you can do what you need to with it, stretch it out. And also, what I like to do is we can skew it a little bit and go to Edit, Transform, and we can do Skew. So now I can kind of bring it in to have more of that. You know how the clouds closer to the horizon seem smaller and further off, right? So I might want to squish those in and do that a little bit. Have a little more of that effect. Okay. And this is a quick. So I've made no selections. I'm just going to put it here. All right. So we have our little girls and we have our sky. Our little girls and our sky. So I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to go back to the background. And now I'm going to select the sky that I want to replace. And you can use, if you click and hold out, we can do the quick selection tool or the magic wand. Magic wand sometimes works great. And so I am going to, let's do a 3x3, click. All right, so it selected the majority of what we wanted. I just clicked and it did it. And it's not selecting the little girls. It's selecting very similar pixels. My tolerance was set at 21. And now I want to refine the edge. You can click right up here in the tool option toolbar, or you can go to select and refine edge or modify. So we'll refine the edge. Okay. So we can show the radius. See that? You can, what I want to do, just modify that a little bit. I want to feather it just a little bit. Let's see. So I might choose Smart Radius. And then output. So how is this selection going to be presented to us after I get out of this menu? And what I could choose is just a layer mask, just a new layer. So if I chose just a new layer, we would have a layer with just that blue sky. We could do new layer with mask. And then we could do new document with layer mask. Let's do new layer with mask and hit OK. All right. So I'll turn this back on. We have a mask. So it's going to hide the little girls and it's going to show us the sky. Okay, it's going to hide the little girls and show us the sky when we clip it. So if I turn it off, you see there's nothing happening. We can't see anything right now. But I'm going to turn on the sky and I'm going to hover between it and do Alt-click. So now the sky is showing where where that mask was. And there's tutorials. It's me doing the video tutorial. So if you get any of these Montana skies, they come with video tutorials on how to use them and how to make selections. All right. So what we can do too is lower this down. I'll often go one step further and add a mask to this. Okay, I've added a mask. If you're not, for new users, this might be overwhelming. So I've added a mask to the sky, and now I'm going to use the gradient to taper it off so that we're not seeing 100% of it all the way down. So we're just going to see start strongest at the top and taper off to the bottom. Do even more. Let's see. Okay. So you can just keep clicking and pulling out till you get what you want. I think I got pretty much like that. Let's see, try it again. See how it tapers it off and it helps it look a little more realistic. We could still always lower the layer opacity, or you can all the way up, but just help blend it a little bit more. So before and after. And by using that gradient, then we're not seeing any type of halo that we were seeing previously, because it tapered it off and blended together. Isn't that cool? All right, I'm gonna do another one. And let's see. That one was really difficult. That one was tricky. Let's see. Trying to get one that I could do quickly for y'all and not overwhelm you. Okay, so we can do that one. All right, so I'm going to go to File, Place Embedded, and then find the picture I want. Sometimes I need to be able to see my picture still so I can get a bit of it. And use the clouds or skies that would fit well with that image. Don't use one that just wouldn't make any sense. And also look for where the light is coming from. So here we got light coming up from the bottom of these clouds, but we have light coming in front of her right here. So this one would not make sense either. Okay, you gotta look at what would be good. And so here we pretty much are going to need some type of blue skies. Something that would, I'm just clicking through so you can see all the beautiful skies that come with it. And again, this won't work either. Remember, the direction of the light, directionality is important. It's so important. I'm going to go back down to one of these. Let's just say with that. Okay, and place embedded. And again, I'm going to back up, edit, transform, skew. So here I'll just move it and skew this in. Whoops, skew that into there. Oops, sorry. My mouse is like sticky tonight. Not one to let go. So I'm gonna hide it now. I'm gonna come back to my background and get my magic brush here, magic selection brush, and click. Keep clicking and adding to it. The other thing I could use, oops, and I might switch to this one, the quick selection brush. And then you just can select, you just kind of brush. All right, so it did select these stalks here, but that's okay. I'm okay with that. And we can refine the edge if we need to. I do like to feather it often, and I'm not worried about the rest of it. I just don't have time. Here I've taken up a lot of your time. Go down to Selection, New Layer with Mask. All right, and then hit OK. All right, so it turned off our background when we did that. I'm going to turn the background back on. So you see, it's the same image. If we see our mask, that we're able to see the sky and not able to see the little girl. When we clip, you have to understand about clipping. When we clip the sky to it, then the sky is going to show through wherever is white right here. So I'm going to turn this back on, hover between them, and do Alt-click. So now the blue sky is showing. And actually cut off a little bit right here. So I'm going to come back here and do V for move. Oh, that was not the picture. It was probably the selection. So it's a little defined. It's going to be okay. So I'm going to do a mask icon. It looks like a rectangle with a circle in the middle. And then I'm going to use my gradient tool. Make sure it's black and white. Blend mode normal, 100%. Click and drag down. And so then we, actually I would probably do it this way a little bit more, since the sun's coming from over there. Okay. And we can always reduce the layer opacity a little bit. So we just have a little more interesting sky than we did before. Any questions about adding the skies? Can I show how to shape the sky again? Okay, that I did edit and then transform and then skew. There are some shortcuts also by using either the Alt, Command, or Shift keys, but I don't want to get into that. It's confusing. It's not on the notes. So it's easier to go down to Edit, Transform, and Skew. So you're going to pull, and you pull out the top, make it big, and then make your bottom taper in. Because what that's going to do is make that smaller and give that more of a far away look. And because that's what happens when you look down to the horizon, those clouds get smaller. As you look further up, they get bigger. And by using that gradient, it just tapers it off, and we don't have to worry about our selection being perfect. You know, we still see these stalks, don't we? It's not a big deal. It's very, very easy. I think a lot of people get bogged down in making their selections perfect in order to replace their skies, when if they would just get the selection, feather it a little bit, and then do new layer with mask, clip your sky, and then do a gradient and have it gradually come down, which it looks very realistic as well. It really does. And then we have it fade down, and you don't notice if the selection is perfect or not. Katie, sorry, I mispronounced your name, Katie. So let me undo let me undo this. So here, the cloud is not clipped. And what it means to be clipped is it's only going to show through this mask. When you clip something, it's only going to show through right there. And you can hover in between the two. You hold down your Alt or Option key. So you hold it down, and then you just click your mouse. All right? There is another way. So I'm going to back up. I'm going to undo that. Command Z. It steps back one. You can come up to Layer, and I think it was Layer. I don't do it this way very often. Nope. Yeah, Layer. Oh, there is a way to clip it here. Create clipping mask. There we go. Okay, so Layer, create clipping mask. Here we could release it. I can create it. And there's also, nope, I used to be able to do keyboard shortcut, but no, just the Alt click. Okay, good questions. Lonnie said, this is my first webinar. I loved it. I'm so glad. Thank you so much. I cannot wait to use my Montana skies tomorrow. When I don't have 5 kids running around me. I can sympathize, Lonnie. I had 4, so I know what that's like, and my niece is with me all the time, so it seems like I have 5, but I understand that. And don't worry about being late. This is being recorded, and we'll be able to do it, be able to see it in a few days. All right. Juliet said, and Erica both had the same question. How do you use the gradient again? Good question. So let's do that. All right. Do you know how many times I almost end the webinar by hitting the wrong thing? One of these days, I'm actually going to do it by accident. All right, so how do I use the gradient? And I'm going to take this mask and I'm going to throw it away. So I'm going to click on it and drag it to the trash can. And so my mask is gone. So here, we have a definite, and actually the selection's not bad, except for there's a tiny, tiny little bit of halo around her, just a tiny bit. See it? And then our stalks are there, and then we have a very defined. So how it's selected was very defined, like a cut. See that cut edge right there? And that's not the picture. Well, it might be actually because I tweaked it. So let me go back, and it's because I altered it. So I bet that yeah. See, there it is. So I'm going to click and drag it down. That's what it was. All right, when I saw the outline, I thought it wasn't the picture, but it was the picture when I got my brain together. Okay, so we have this. So if I turn everything off, this is our mask. So it's hiding, because it's black. See where it's black? It's hiding her. Because when I did the selection, and I did refine in my, down at the bottom, it asked me what I wanted to do with the selection. And I said, new layer with mask. So the area that I selected was going to show, and the area not selected is now masked out. It's being concealed. It's black right there. When I turn on the background again, now we're seeing this top half and this bottom half together. That's what we're seeing. So I can turn this off. Let's just keep it off. Now I added my cloud. Whoops, I need to unclip it. Let's unclip it. Oops. There we go. So now I've added my cloud and I've got it 100%. So now even my skies are hiding the old sky, right? And we want to clip it. So I'm going to go to layer and create clipping mask. So now the only thing showing is the white area of that selection, what we selected, because that's what we selected. If I turn on the background, now we see the background, the bottom. So if you, in the last few pages of the notes I gave you tonight, explain that you're always looking top down, top down. So we're looking, the clouds are clipped to this area. We see just the sky area, and we keep looking down and we see the bottom. But this top portion of the background is being hidden by the sky above it. Okay, so now the question was the gradient. I'm going to add a mask. I need to be able to add a mask to this sky. I'm going to come down to the bottom, and it looks like a rectangle with a circle in the middle. So now I have a mask. It doesn't help me any unless I use a white or black brush, right? But not necessarily a brush, just white and black colors. White and black colors. So I can use the gradient, which is G on your keyboard, G. And I want it to be white and black. I'd actually, there we go. Oh, all right. And white and black, somehow it got shifted just then to like a blue and black. All right, so I want white and black. And you've got different radial or you've got different gradients. So we've got a radial gradient, an angle gradient, reflected gradient, and a diamond gradient. And I want the linear. So I could go top to bottom, side to side, corner to corner. Blend mode normal, opacity 100%, right? And this is good, dither and transparency, all right. And I'm just going to click and drag down past where I want to stop. There we go. Beautiful. Just that simple. Now I'm going to do this again, and let's pretend that don't look at what I just did. Don't look at the reverse right now. Now I'm going to do it again. Click and drag. And I did not get the result I expected. So now it's stronger on the bottom and lighter on the top. So what's happened is, and I'm showing this because it may happen to you, that if this reverse is selected, that's what's happening. So just uncheck it and try again. So I'm just, but you make sure your mask is checked. You can't be on this. So if I'm on this, it won't even let me use it unless I rasterize it, which I'll have to do. Okay. So now if I apply it, it's going to do this blue to black thing, isn't it? Or it switched it again here. And because it's reading those colors, but because I was on the wrong thing, I was on the sky. I need to be on the mask. Need to be on the mask. So I'm going to click and drag down, and there we go. Where's the gradient on Photoshop Elements? Okay, it hit G. Hit G on your keyboard. It should pop up for you. It's the same keyboard shortcut, G. But it might be that you're seeing the paint bucket tool. So same for Photoshop. If you're seeing the paint bucket tool, click and drag out, and then click on gradient. Elements 10 and older, you'd have to do the same thing. They're nestled in together. You're going to click and drag out. Elements 11 through 13, you might have it where you click on the whatever's showing, so paint bucket, click on paint bucket, and then down at the bottom of Photoshop Elements 11 through 13, you're going to have the option down here in the bottom left corner to click on gradient if you don't use the keyboard shortcut of G for gradient. I'm almost positive that just G will get you your gradient in Elements, okay? Now, I want to say this. So look, our keyboard shortcut is all G, and it's going to remember the last thing you use. So if I click to something else and then I do G, it's going to do paint bucket again. And I meant to mention that. So when tools are nestled together, the keyboard shortcut is often the exact same thing. And Photoshop is going to remember your last used tool in that category. I hope that makes sense. It's going to remember your last used tool in that category. Alrighty, so we're at 8:36. Y'all were wonderful. And I know an weekday evening is hard, so I think a lot of people missed, but we are glad and very thankful for those who joined us, and I hope you learned a lot. And let us know if the things that are interesting you that you'd love to learn about in future trainings. We do hope to have one on doing a clean edit soon, very soon, or during the summer sometime, I think, and maybe even one on actions, how to even use them, how to install them, how to manage them, how to make the most of them, that kind of thing. So actions, clean edit. I'd love to do a whole hour on skies and textures, adding those in. But do let us know what you're interested in learning.